Hello, everyone. So today we have two sisters on, Michele and Sam, who have a memory of their whole family being abducted. A friend of mine saw Sam's post on the Our Experiencer sub and said I should go take a look, and kind of blew my mind. Yeah, a whole family getting abducted and everybody remembering, and everyone also having the same scars on their forearms is amazing to me. So I asked Sam if she would be okay with an interview, and she said yes. And then her sister hopped in and said yes. So I'm really excited to bring them on. But before I bring them on, I'll bring on my co-host, Adam. Hey, man, how you doing today?
Yeah, doing great. Looking forward to the interview. So it's always a good time.
Yeah, definitely. And this is going to be really cool. Later, we should have Caspian coming in as well, who was really excited to meet the girls in person because they had so much in common as experiencers. So this is going to be really good to hear once Caspian gets on as well. But without further ado, I'll bring on Sam. Hi, Sam. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good.
Good. Well, thanks again for coming on. And I know we have no okay, we'll work with that. And other than that, your first memory, you were about 3 years old when family happened, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, please tell us your experience.
Okay, so we all thought it was a dream, actually. So it started with me waking up in the middle of the night in my bed, and I heard tapping on our window between mine and Michelle's beds, and Michele was already sitting up wide awake looking at the window. So I kind of looked over and we were kind of talking like, what is that? And we didn't know, so we both kind of stood up and got out of bed, and we're kind of looking at the window. And this house, where the window was, it was on the second story, but it was above a hill, so it was almost like 3 stories high. There were no trees or anything around that could have been tapping the window. And eventually we walked over to the window and looked out, and there's just nothing there. It kind of felt like there was something there that was like making itself invisible. And right before, it was like when we were about to like see what this thing was, the brightest light we had ever seen started shining through the other window between my brother's beds, and they sat straight up and started screaming. So we started screaming. My parents ran in the room and grabbed all 4 of us, and we ran to the bedroom across the hall. And we ducked down next to the bed and got all quiet. And after about 30 seconds, the light started shining through that window. So we started screaming, and we ran downstairs, and we hid in another room. And for a while, we were just kind of like, okay, well, what do we do? Because we're running from room to room, and this light just kept finding us. And eventually my dad's like, we have to go outside. So we very quietly went through this side door, ran down these stairs, and out the back door down this hill. And I remember I was like 3, so I was like super scared. All of us are barefoot in our pajamas, like, why are we running outside? And I remember I couldn't keep up, so I started crying, and my dad stopped me and was like, Sam, they're going to hear you. You have to be quiet. I can't carry you because you're slowing me down, because it was this part of this really steep part of this hill by the house. And I was just like, who are they? Like, who's going to what? So he picked me up over his shoulder anyway, and I looked over the house, and it looked like a dark storm cloud to me, because I guess I was trying to process it in my brain. It was just a huge part over the house, and this light was coming through it, and it was frantically shining from room to room, like trying to find us. So we just ran all the way down this hill. He put me back down, and we ran to this like fitness trail. It was these stairs that led up to these apartments through the woods, and he just said split up. And I looked down when I run, so when I looked up, all I saw was Michele and my brother Chris ran to the right. My mom and Nick ran to the left. Mom and Chris ran to the right. Nick, 2 ran to the left, 2 ran to the right, and me and my dad ran straight. And we hid behind a tree, and we're just sitting there waiting, and eventually the light started coming over by the forest, and I start kind of panicking. And it was like right next to us, so I just stood out and started screaming because I knew it was going to find us anyway. And everybody was just like, oh, Sam, what are you doing? And the light shined on us, so all of us ran together, and then we would wake up. Every single time, we would just wake up. And I just thought it was a dream for years, and I was like, that's really weird. Why do I keep having this dream? And eventually, like, the light would be replaced with things that I was scared of at the time, like the T-Rex from Jurassic Park, or Beetlejuice as the snake in the movie. Like, if he looked through the window and he saw you, you were, like, caught. And it just kept going on all the way up until I was probably 18, and then I just never had the dream again. And when we were in my 20s, we were at the farm talking about it, and I was like, well, there's all this paranormal stuff that's happened at the house, but I used to have this nightmare, and I started telling it, and Michele was just finishing my sentences. She was just like, oh, so the tapping on the window woke us up, and then we went to this room, and then we went downstairs, and then we ran outside, and she even knew which way we ran in the woods to hide. And then I looked over at my dad, and he was like mid eating a green bean on his fork and just stopped, and his whole face was pale. And I was like, do you remember this too? And he just put it down, and he was like, something like that. And then he never talked about it. But I remember randomly overnight, my brother and I, the next day, were looking down, and we're like, oh, hey, we have that same, we didn't know what it was. We didn't know it was a scar. We were just like, oh, we have a little patch of nothing. And then as we got older, started looking, every single person had that same mark on that same arm in the same spot. Overnight, nobody has any memory of how they got it. And yeah, we didn't know until we started talking about it in our, when I was in my 20s. So
That's why.
yeah.
And where you guys talked about. And there's nothing right?
No. Nope. It's just a little white mark that's about a centimeter long.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And then when it comes to seeing the dark cloud, it's still in your memory, the dark cloud.
Yeah. It doesn't really, I assumed it was a storm cloud as a kid, but it almost looked more circular, but it was just a dark shadow over the house. Yeah.
And then did you mention that it was like moving around the house because the lights were
the light was frantically boop, 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 so that it was a little bit moving. So I just assumed it was a cloud.
Okay. And so Adam, do you have any questions?
No, yeah. I'm going.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I thought I saw some. So then, Sam, you all started talking about it around you said 18 or so. The next question is, when did you actually start to have memories of being on the craft?
I think I always had the memories. I just didn't talk about it.
Oh,
because
okay.
yeah. Because I just assumed like those were just really foggy too. It's just
because they were like
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have other memories that I just never ever talked about because I was just like, well, that's weird. And I know that my sister and I both became like obsessed with trying to move things with our minds. Like it felt like we had done it before, but we couldn't do it. Like we would set a toy on the stairs and try to get it to move, and we just couldn't do it. But it felt like we had done it before.
About what age?
Around the same age, 3 to 4. Yeah.
Oh, that's.
And Michelle's older, so Michele would have been around 6. So.
How long have you been moving things?
How long do you think? I mean, it was a while. A little bit each day. Randomly on and off. For probably like 20 minutes at a time.
Okay. Oh, and did that go on for a few months or a few weeks? Or?
Probably a few months, I would say. Yeah.
And then again, so you always have the memory they were like dreams to you, so not probably about what you thought they were.
Yeah.
But tell us about what you do remember.
I just remember that we were standing in a room. It was all white. It kind of reminded me of a hospital. And they had windows where other people were just kind of watching us from the windows. And I thought I remembered the people that took us there were all wearing like lab coats or something. But they just took us to this room full of kids. All of the kids, they were completely silent. They did not speak. They had like blonde hair. No, it didn't even seem like they had eyelashes. Something about them was just off. So all the other siblings were just standing there, freaked out, just staring like, why are we here? And they were freaking out because they took our parents. We don't know what they did with our parents while they took us here. So, and me, all of a sudden it just clicked because all these kids are just like moving toys with their mind and playing. And I'm like, oh, they just want us to play with them. So I ran over and started playing with them. And then Michele was even like, no, Sam, what are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I just thought she was being mean. I was like, I'm playing with these kids. What do you mean? So they were just wanted us to like teach them how to be more human. They didn't understand laughing. They thought that was weird. And there were different things, like, I know there was like a fire truck there because our dad was a firefighter. I was like, oh, there's a fire truck. But that was like one of the boring toys, so I didn't go play with that. And then there was just random shapes, and I thought those looked boring too, but when you touch them, you could feel like warm and fuzzy, or you could feel happy. And then there were other things that were almost like puzzles, like puzzle boxes. And they were trying to get us to move things with our minds. I don't know if we had to like solve the puzzle. I mean, I couldn't do it. I was just like, oh, this is cool. But I just remember they wanted us to play with these kids. And all through growing up, I remember that I had like a best friend that had blonde hair, but I can't remember her name. And I just knew that I was best friends with this little girl. And I ended up going through like all of my yearbooks, and I'm like, this girl wasn't in any of like my school. Like, who is this person that I keep remembering? But yeah.
And that was one of the kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the girl that I like ran over to.
Well, I was going to say, was it one of the hybrid kids or? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh wow. That's
like, as far as I remember, we were the only like kids, like humans, that were like in this room. All the other kids were just, everybody thought was just weird. And they only talked like telepathically.
Say again?
They only talk telepathically.
Okay. And again, could you describe, like you said, there were windows, and I wanted to know if you could describe, to best of your knowledge. You said that some of them had blonde hair, so it sounds like they were like Nordics or Pleiadians, who knows? But can you describe everything you saw through windows, if what people were dressed in again, and what they looked like?
So I don't remember what the people looked like exactly. That's the part that is like really, really foggy. I just remember that the ones that followed us to the room or led us to the room, I thought it was like lab coats or something. But I just know that there were other people or things watching us from the windows. It was basically like being in like a NICU unit that's surrounded by windows, and people were just looking through the windows.
And what did the kids look like? Did they look like us, or are their eyes slightly bigger? Or can you describe it?
No, they looked like us, but they were just quiet, and it just felt like something was off. But all of them had blonde hair.
That's amazing. So these memories you had, that you've always had, you just never talked about them. When did you and Michele figure out that you were both had a sixth sense, for lack of better words? I know that you both said that you're empaths in a sense. When did you start noticing that?
I don't know. I think I've always kind of known, because I would see or feel things in the house that we grew up in. Like, I knew there was like a lady that was crying in this one room, and come to find out we were older, that's where they held funerals. So, I mean, we've probably since we were that young.
I see the captain. So I'm gonna bring Caspian on. And until he's able to talk, he will talk. But other than that, oops, he just left. All right, I'll fix that in post. First I'll see Adam if you have any questions.
Yes. I guess more so like a comment. We've definitely been seeing some correlations just between, like, I guess you could say psi, or like that sixth sense, any type of psychic ability, and experiencers who are almost like tested in a way on these crafts or in these environments where there almost seems to be some type of like education or testing limit to a lot of these, especially children, in like very similar to how you described, almost like a hospital setting. Sometimes it's like military, this very like pasty white overglow, most likely no windows. And even further, as the experiencer gets older, it seems that these experiences diminish or they just completely end. So it's very interesting how there seems to be isolation of children put in these like settings where psychic ability is tested in more ways than one. But it's just definitely very interesting because there really is a correlation with a lot of experiences we've talked to on this series, experiences that I've just kind of heard about, read about, listened to, and my own experiences too. So it's just very fascinating, like what's going on here with like really children and this, I guess you could say, psi abilities, where it's just there seems to be value in it. There seems to be some type of like testing from these beings. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And hi, Caspian.
Hello. Finally made it in.
Yeah, nice to see you. Yeah, we were just talking about her experience. She just described her family abduction, and we were just going over her and Michelle's abilities that they realized they had pretty early on. And and now that you're here, Caspian, you also found that from your experiences as well, you both have very similar experiences, especially being taught games or to do things on the craft.
Yeah, and especially with the use of the same sort of toys as well, except yours, Sam, they were colored toys, whereas mine were these kind of semi-transparent grayish white sort of objects. And it seems that yours were straight to the playroom, and you just kind of used them and tested with them there, whereas I had to be taken to a whole separate room to do the testing, and then, you know, if we got it right, we could bring them back to the room. But other than that, it's very similar, remarkably so. And it's also interesting that it seems that we had very similar abilities, and it's obvious that those abilities were their focus and the things that they needed. So yeah, it's remarkable. It still absolutely boggles my mind, because up until this point, I'd never come across anybody else who had experiences like mine at all. No parallels or anything. Yeah, so yeah, it's absolutely incredible. It really is.
Well, I still think it is amazing. And then what else blew me away? Well, I guess once you really start looking at abductions and the stories, you find lots of similar threads. And again, the similarities that you guys were saying on the Discord was things like eye colors changes with mood.
Yeah.
The blood types are all similar.
Exactly the same eye color changes too. Yes, it's the same set of tones.
Yep.
Yeah. And what else do I have? I have oops, sorry. That rashes in the sun, fibromyalgia, anxiety, PTSD. And you all at some point felt that your empath and feel or experience other people's emotions. And,
all the time. I have a hard time going in public because it's everybody all at once.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, tell us more about.
It's just like if your energy bubble merges with somebody else, you just feel everything they're feeling. So my ex was in a band, and anytime I'd go to a shows, it was all these people laughing and talking, but all of them were just like super depressed and sad. And I was just like, this is weird, because everybody's laughing, but they're not happy. Like, I have to get away. So I would just be like double fisting Jack and Cokes because I was so nervous all the time, sitting in the corner like, hi guys. Yeah.
I can't. Can you describe that more in detail? Like what it feels like?
It just feels like it's your feelings. So sometimes you're just so overwhelmed. It's like why am I sad? And then somebody will walk away and then you're not sad anymore. I'm like, oh, it wasn't me, it was them. So it just feels like it's your feelings.
And do you also do that with animals?
That's a good question. Not so much my cats. Cats do their own thing, but maybe dogs, yes. But I haven't really been around other animals that much, so.
Other than the human.
Yeah.
And Caspian, you have experiences with that as well?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And it very often is the problem that you have all of these emotions, especially from being in proximity to somebody or somehow being connected to somebody for some reason. Like you start having this absolute flood of emotions, like to the point that you're breaking down into tears, or you're getting really angry for no reason, or you just have this sudden burst of happiness or something. And it's not until you've actually worked out where it's coming from, who it belongs to, and perhaps even why, that you realize, what this anomaly is. It's not actually your own feelings. But it's kind of, I don't know if I hasten to call it a blessing or a curse. It's neither really, but it gives you this kind of inescapable insight into people that I guess is sometimes a bit of an intrusion, but you can't help it. Because people have reasons for blocking things. They have reasons for masking it and suppressing it. But it's kind of difficult when you're around somebody else who can feel things. But I mean, for me, it's been people, but also it's been more, as I've said before, it's been more like animals and other things like plants and such as well. I've been able to feel from too, which is bizarre. And even though it's slightly different with like plants and lower level things, because so to speak, because they don't have quite the same range of emotions and motivations, there's similarities there. It's obvious there's still a sort of underlying consciousness factor to all of it that's shared and interpretable. But yeah, with humans, it could be hugely overwhelming. With ufonauts, it's a whole other thing entirely, because they either feel things, in my experience, they either feel things in this kind of maximum way, or they feel things in this very kind of minimal, almost like cold way, but not cold, almost not emotionless, but almost like it's there, but it's not quite as developed, it's not quite as utilized as it is with us, not quite as expanded. It maybe it can be something that can be taught to a degree with some of them, but with most of them, it's just not something they inherently use or is inherently part of them. So for want of a better word, it is very alien communicating with them sometimes because of that. But yeah.
Sam, when you were on the craft, you were saying that most of the time it was about teaching the other kids how to have emotions for the most part. But do you remember anything about being taught or trained to do something in particular?
Probably just eventually we got to where we could take apart this puzzle box type thing. And we could talk to the other kids telepathically. That's about all that I remember of actually being taught how to do. But it's like as soon as we got back home, we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Which sucked, because I was like, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to go home and do all this. And I couldn't for some reason. But even now, I have talked telepathically twice with my oldest child. That was really weird.
Right.
Talk about it. So the first time, they were about 3. And they were at their babysitter's house, and they were just throwing a fit. And they wanted chocolate milk, and they looked at me, and we just looked at each other, and in her head, she was like, can I have chocolate milk? And I was like, no, put your shoes on, we're leaving. And neither of us had actually said that, and she just started screaming. And then I was like, oh my gosh, wait, nobody else, like, we weren't moving our mouths. It took a second. And the second time was actually just a few years ago. We were playing Uno, and they didn't have any of the colors that I was trying to change with the draw 4 or with the wild. And in my head, I was like, just throw down a 2. It's fine. Just throw down a 2. And out loud, she was like, all right, fine. I'll just put a 2 down. And I was like, I didn't say that. She was like, out loud. Yeah, out loud. Yep, and that was it though.
Have you ever thought of trying to practice with your daughter?
Maybe one time, but we couldn't do it again. I feel like it just has to be accidental in the moment. Unfortunately.
It seems like it's almost one of those things where you're just doing it freely. second nature.
Yep.
That's amazing. Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah, we've really been seeing like this theme where I guess you could say psi seems to be not necessarily enhanced, but it seems to be more controllable, like in these environments during these like abductions and things like that. But then when that experiencer is in waking state, it almost happens like you mentioned, almost like by chance or by accident, which to me, in my own experiences, if you try to force anything in terms of psi, it's not going to work. It's like, it doesn't seem to work that way. I don't know if it's just like the incapability of like humans in this realm, or lack of like training, or lack of understanding. I'm not really sure, but it seems that if you try to force something, it just doesn't really work. You need to just like let it flow. Almost similar. This is going to be a very loose comparison, but it's almost similar to like the psychological state of flow, where it's like you're in this very specific perception where you're doing a task that's difficult, but not too difficult, and you're able to like have this perception where it's like there's no time, even though it's a difficult task. It's like effortlessly. You're like doing everything really. It's almost like you're watching yourself do something. And I feel like there's kind of a loose comparison to psi, where it kind of just like flows, and like when that information comes, it comes in. But if you try to like decipher it or force it, it's not going to work. It takes time and to sometimes sit on that feeling, especially if it's like anything that's like empathic or like receiving information. It takes a little bit of time to decipher. It's like, whoa, these aren't my emotions that I'm feeling. These are actually someone else's or something else's. And then once you kind of understand that, you can kind of release it, or manage it more effectively. But that skill isn't developed, you're just going to be extremely overwhelmed all the time from all this energy from other people.
Yeah, it took a while for me to realize that they weren't my emotions. I just thought, I was like, oh my gosh, why do I hate going outside? But we were at this music festival one time, and I was sitting alone in a tent with one of our friends, and I was just so overwhelmed. I was about to cry, and I was like, why am I about to cry? And he got up and walked away, and it just stopped. I was like, oh, that wasn't me, that was him. And then I felt really bad for him, but yeah. I didn't know. But yeah, with all of the like trying to talk telepathically or move anything with your mind, it felt like there was a mental block. We were forcing it, and it was like, well, you're getting further away from it. You're not going to be able to do it if you keep trying.
Michele at some point had said that your whole family has a natural ability to pick up on things paranormal. And that particular house, I don't know if it was the Colerain house or another one, but there was I'll read what she said. She said, the man that we felt haunted the area above the stairs and his bedroom and bathroom right next to it. We only used that room as a guest room when our aunt and uncle brought our cousins to visit because it was so creepy. I talked to my aunt about it as an adult, and she felt the same way when they stayed there. What house was that at? Was that at the Colerain house as well?
Yeah, all of that was all at that house. I actually call that house the slaughterhouse because they like broke in and basically murdered the entire family because they were hiding slaves. So, oh yeah, that house, like my dad even said, like one of his friends walked in, he was giving him a tour, and he said he took one step into the dining room and looked around and said, man, there's something evil in this house, and he walked straight back out and never came back. So yeah, actually that's my first memory ever, was being in the bathtub and having a soldier standing by the toilet just like staring at us. And anytime our mom would leave to go down the hall to get a towel, because she never brought a towel into the bathroom, he would be right here in our faces, and we would just like not look at him. And it felt like he was going to hurt us if we looked at him. And I remember one day I was like, why am I scared of something that's not there? Like you could see him out of the corner of your eye, but if you looked, he wasn't there. And so I started turning to look, and Michele, because we were so little, we were taking it back together. She's like, don't do it. And I turned and I looked, and it was like the tension just got so high. But I was like, okay, there's nothing there. And right when it was like something bad was about to happen, my mom walked right back in the room with the towels, and it was just like, bam, all the tension went back down to zero.
What did it feel like? I mean, I guess it just feels like something's going to happen.
Yeah. You ever pissed anybody off really bad? It felt just like that. Like you just angered somebody and they were about to punch you. That's what it felt like. Like,
Okay.
the tension was so high. And
Copy,
then
copy.
it just, bam.
And
It happened every single time we took a bath there. Every single time.
that's not cool.
No. So Michele said when she talked to the people that lived in the house before, the first thing, or one of the things the other lady said was just, did you ever see the old man like standing by the toilet? I was just like, what? Yeah, he traumatized our childhood. But my dad actually had a couple experiences with him. They had the house even when he was 18, like before any of us were born. And his parents left to go visit his brother who just got back from the Vietnam War. So he was in the house alone for like 2 weeks. And he said he heard somebody walking up the stairs slowly, because it did that every night. Walk up the stairs, go in the bathroom, shut the door, do all kinds of stuff, and then just never come back out. Well, he heard him walking up the stairs and he thought somebody broke in. So he said he slid off the bed and tried to like slide underneath it. And he was just laying there like, oh my gosh, they're going to hurt me. And he said the footsteps walked straight up to the door that time of the room that he was in. It didn't go in the bathroom. And he said after like 45 minutes, they never walked away or anything. So he kind of went over and looked and opened the door and nobody was there. And I still, like, in my head, I can tell you exactly what he looked like. Dark blue suit with big brass buttons. And that's exactly how my dad described him too. He had a big old beard. So we were like Googling, like, all right, which part of the war was he on? But I've never been able to like find a picture of him. It was like straight up soldier. Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know why he would hate kids in a bathtub. That's what always confused me. I was like, dude, chill out.
Yeah, that's
Actually, I think the only thing I comment is the weird connection between soldiers and bathrooms. Because when I think it was like a year or two before I was born, there was a place that my mum and my birth dad were living. This apartment, and she had an incident where she was in a bathroom, and one of the soldiers from the War of the Cavaliers versus the Roundheads here in England just appears behind her and is visible in the mirror. And then she describes like how he looks with all the curly hair and the hat he's got and everything, all of the regalia, all of the attire. And the moment she turns around, of course, he's gone. But apparently she said you could always feel like this sort of heavy presence of something being there, and it was just in the bathroom. So I don't know what that connection is. But yeah.
I'm not sure, but right outside of that bathroom to your left was a bedroom that there was always like a dark shadow standing in the back corner. And the way that it looked to me, which is so strange, it's like that scene from Insidious where the demon's like sitting there and he turns and he points at the little kid in his bed.
Yeah,
it's exactly what it looked like. And it was there all the time. So anytime we would go in that room, I would always have my back to it. Like, I'm not looking at you. I'm not acknowledging you. Well, there was a huge stain in front of that bedroom door on the floor in the carpet. And I walked upstairs one day when all the adults were standing around talking about it. And they were like, well, if you look at an angle, you can see it. And it's huge. Like, it was just a huge blood stain. And somebody else commented and was like, well, they always said that you can't get rid of blood. And I was like, what you guys talking about? And they're like, go back downstairs. Ugh. But they were talking about something cool. So I was like, oh, what you talking about? And yeah, they said you could only see it from an angle. And it was just this huge blood stain in front of the door. And Michele thinks that that's where the soldier died. And that's why he was always going into the bathroom. But I don't know. I thought maybe it was the thing where he killed someone. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. The house was messed up. And I'm so mad that they tore it down because I was like, that was the one place that could prove to anybody that there's something paranormal going on. I just know that the weirdest thing to me about that entire house was that when you would go into the basement, it felt like something was going to hurt you. So you could only go in that front room. And through the doorway, it looked like the rest of the basement was just mud. The first room was concrete. And I never went out of that room because it looked like there were bones sticking out of mud in the other room. And I'm like, why is nobody else reacting to this? Well, I remember specifically one day my dad and my grandpa walked in there, and I even told my grandpa, don't go in there, you're going to get your shoes muddy. And he looked down at his shoes and goes, oh, it's kind of dusty. And I thought that was so weird. I was like, he's walking on mud. Why is he saying it's going to be dusty? Like, clearly he's going to have mud on his shoes. No, because I'm talking about it later, and every single one of us kids saw that it was mud, and apparently the entire basement was concrete, except, yeah. And there was only one room that apparently had a dirt floor, and it was a closet in the back that I never went to, because I never went into that other room. But my dad said nobody ever went in it. It was a walk-in closet, and it felt like they had shut a woman in there and locked her in to die. That's what my dad told me. So he said not even the grandparents went in that room. They were like, nope, we're not going in there. But all of the kids, like even my brother and my sister, saw that just the first room was concrete, but all the adults were like, no, the whole basement was. And my brother's 6 years older than me, so if I was 4 and 5 seeing that, he was easily, what, 10, 11?
Yeah, what's that called? Second sight? That's
No idea. Sounds about right.
Don't know.
yeah, because that's just amazing that all the kids saw mud.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Was it something that you could feel as well? Like if you walked in the basket, you could feel the mud.
Good question. I did not go in there. I was just like, nope, I'm not
Fair
going
enough.
anywhere out of there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, I don't know. Did you ever go there?
Yeah, so it felt more like a pressed,
You don't
like a dirt floor. So, like they're saying, mud. It wasn't like soppy, wet, that kind of thing, but it was like a
More like
damp
compacted.
feeling basement. Yeah, it was like a packed dirt, like cellar, basically.
They swore it was concrete the whole time.
And you saw bones.
Yeah, that freaked me out. It felt like they murdered the people for hiding slaves and murdered the slaves and just buried them in the basement. But I always thought they were like trying to crawl back out, so I was like, oh, yeah.
Now, I would wonder if there was any historical documenting of when they tore the house down. I wonder if they dug up the foundation and found anything.
It's a good question. We always wanted to go down to the library and like flip through the books and everything, but I don't think they ever said anything. We went there when they were tearing the house down and watched them tear it down, and we were all like sobbing because it was like our entire childhood. But yeah, 2 kids broke in and like burnt it down. I know.
So Sam, you also have a story about dating a certain person that was not so good. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I actually, I went to the Horror Hound convention with my sister and her husband, and because the cast of Bates Motel was supposed to be there, and we ended up going there, and the whole cast canceled. So I was just there. I mean, since I'm in public, I'm just like, oh, well, I'll just get drunk because I'm nervous. I can feel everybody's feelings. So, like, 10 a.m., I had, like, 6 Jack and Cokes for breakfast, and I don't drink, like, ever, so I was just super loud and obnoxious.
And I bet it didn't help at all.
Yeah. So Michele, she's just like, oh my gosh, Sam, I can't handle you. She's like, get in here and sit down. And I swear she opened this wall at this convention center that apparently was a door, but I swear it was a wall. And I walk in and everybody turns and looks at me and I'm like, oh. And apparently it was a press conference for the actors for Saw. And she's like, just go in there, find a row with 8 seats and sit down. So I'm looking to my left and I'm like, nope. In the first row I see with 8 seats. In the 9th seat, there was this guy sitting there looking at me like, please don't sit next to me. So I was just like, I'm sorry. And I had to like sit next to him. And the whole time, it felt like, you know how like you feel when you get like butterflies with somebody? It wasn't like, it was like that, but in your brain. Like we were like working on the same wavelength. It was the weirdest thing. I've never felt that with anybody. And we were just like, talking because I was so drunk I kept dropping my pictures that I had signed on the floor over and over, and he's like, you keep dropping them. And the first thing he told me was like when we went to leave because I had to pee really bad, he wouldn't give me his phone number because he said that his phone wasn't activated, but he only used it for Wi-Fi, so he had social media but not a phone number. And I was just drunk, so I didn't even think anything of it. But it turns out later it's because he didn't want to be tied to me if he killed me. So so I ended up a couple days later he like added me on Instagram, and I ended up making him a cake. And my point was, since I met him at the Horror Hound convention, I tried to make the creepiest cake possible. So I made like this Ed Gein stitched together skin cake with faces on it, and it bled when you cut into it. And I still have the video of us cutting into it. I brought it to his house, but it took me so long to put stitches in it that I didn't get finished till like after midnight. So I drove like an hour out there to his house, and I told everybody, and they were just like, you're dumb for going out there. You're driving all the way out there at night. You better tell us where you're going, which is actually really smart, which I didn't, But I get there, and his brother and his girlfriend are still up, but they ended up going to bed. So he took me down into the basement, and as soon as we started going down into the basement to eat this cake, I just stopped on the stairs because it felt like there was like a really evil, like, old man at the bottom of the stairs, kind of like staring at me. And I was like, he was like, what are you doing? I was just like, I don't know if I want to pop out the weird yet. I don't want to tell him about that. So I didn't right away, but we ended up going down there. We ended up staying up the entire night talking about, like, that story I just told you with the dream and everything. And he thought that was crazy because he said his uncle used to work on an Air Force base, and he and another guy ended up experiencing something that they couldn't remember. And he said that one day his coworker remembered it, and he ended up committing suicide. And he said every day that his uncle always says, like, I'm scared that I'm going to remember and I'm going to commit suicide, because whatever was so horrible that he committed suicide, he just can't remember. Kind of blew his mind, because he was like, what? My uncle always said something like that. We ended up, actually, this is even creepier. I was sitting on a love seat the entire night, and he sat across the room in a chair. And I mentioned this girl that had gone missing that was the bookstore girl at my college, Caitlin Markham. And he perked up and he came and sat right next to me. And he wanted to know all the details of what people were saying about it. Oh yeah, your faces are great right now. But yeah,
I'm hearing all the red flags.
Yeah, he wanted to know. He was just pretending to know less than he knew. And he was just like, well, who do you think did it? Blah, blah, blah. And everybody, even told him, I said, everybody always said it was her fiance, but he was just this nerdy dude. I don't think he would have killed her. And they found her skull with some hair attached in a plastic bag. So they think that maybe he actually, like, decapitated her. Well, fast forward to later on, when he actually got arrested for killing another girl. Both of them actually kind of looked like me. I fit the profile. Yeah, they looked like we could be related. It was really creepy. But he was stalking her, and for like 8 months before he actually killed her. And it was around the time that he actually popped up and started stalking me again, until I agreed. I was like, oh yeah. He asked if I wanted to go to lunch, and I agreed, but then we never did. And I think that was, yeah. So, pretty sure he was going to, like, finish the job then, because it was around that time. Apparently he had a complete moral and mental breakdown to where his friends couldn't even trust him with their stuff alone. And
you hadn't already?
Yeah, right? No. Right. So, he ended up going after this girl instead. And, yeah, he stalked her for 8 months, to where he was, like, texting her from burner phones saying that he was going to cut her head off and fuck her throat. And yeah, they found Caitlin's head in a bag. And, oh yeah. So, but they ended up finding this girl in the woods, laid out exactly the way Caitlin was. And Caitlin's case is still never solved. But they just don't have enough evidence, I guess, for him. Yeah, but he's serving 17.5 to life. But, right? But he wrapped her body in the blanket that I used that night. And he, oh my gosh, your face. Wow. And I slept in the bed that he killed her in. Oh. It was an air mattress. Yeah. So,
and you didn't feel anything in the bed?
Oh, no. No, I actually didn't want to stay down there, because I told him, this is really creepy. I straight up looked at him and I was like, this is going to sound really weird. But because it didn't feel like it was coming from him. So it felt like it was coming from somewhere else. But I straight up told him, I feel like there's a man down here that absolutely hates women and wants me dead in the worst way possible. And you should have seen his face. He just went, what? And I was talking about him. And I told it to him.
Either that, or you were talking about something like, I guess, more akin to The Shining, where, they get possessed by the ghost of the hotel and want to kill everyone.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like an old man, and he said that's so weird, because my mom refuses to come down here, even to do laundry, because she said there's something down here. But it felt like it was coming from by the bed, where apparently he was drugging and raping and recording and selling these videos. And the thing is,
there's an audience?
Yeah, on the black web, he was selling videos for $5,000 to $10,000 of torture porn.
You are kidding me.
No.
I didn't know that
hold
was
on.
such a thing.
I didn't either. I guess Rule 34, but it gets worse. He made me a drink. He made me a drink that night, and it was like he was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "Ooh, do you have like bourbon or something?" And they had just a little bit, and it ran out. And he was just like, "Oh, well, let me just mix." So he was literally mixing like that. Oh, we ran out. A little bit of vodka. Oh, we ran out. So it was disgusting. So as soon as you took a drink, it would kind of like hurt your stomach a little bit. And he had one too. And we were just like drinking. And then I went upstairs to pee and I came back down and he was just kind of sitting there and he'd go, "You didn't finish your drink." He kept bringing it up. "You didn't finish your drink." So when I took a drink of it, it immediately... Right, that's exactly what happened. It immediately made my stomach hurt. And I remember like starting to feel sleepy, but I just thought it was because it was like probably like 3 a.m. at that point, and I'd been up making this cake, and I was just like, "Oh, I'm getting tired." And I even told him like, "Sorry, I can't finish it. I'm just..." But every single time I'd go upstairs to pee and I'd come back down, he'd be like, "You didn't finish your drink." And I don't...
terrifying how we rationalize away the warning signs.
Yep. So, well, it's because his whole family was home upstairs, too. Mm-hmm. That's what's like even more messed up. Well, apparently there were like at least like 10 to 15-ish other girls that actually drank it and had videos. There was a girl that like he went after me that I was talking to her and I asked if detectives ever contacted her again because they both had to go talk to them, and I didn't realize any of this until I talked to them. And she said one time, she said the detective called me and said he asked if she ever made like snuff porn with him, and she was like, "No." "Why?" And she said the guy hesitated and was like, "Okay, are you sure?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Okay, well, was there ever a time when your dad intervened?" And she was just like... The only thing she could remember was the one night that he stayed the night at her house. She woke up on a stretcher in the ER and her dad was freaking out because he found her unconscious in the bathroom, naked. So she's like, "Okay, there is definitely a video out there of him doing something to my unconscious body, and I just have no idea." And they found it, and they were asking her about it, and she had no idea.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I was talking to them, the detective, he was kind of a dick. He was just like, because I was just like, "Oh yeah, this happened and this happened," and he's like, "We're trying to make sure he doesn't do this to anybody else." And I was like, "Okay." And he's like, literally, he's like, "I'm not gonna lie to you. We're just trying to slap any charge we can on him." He's like, "We talk to a lot of girls, and we're just trying to slap as many rape charges on him as we can." Like,
And they only got him for one thing?
Huh?
They only got him for one thing at the end?
Yep, he actually pled guilty to try to avoid like death penalty, I'm pretty sure. So he got 17.5 to life. So in 17.5 years, he is eligible for parole. But they were investigating him for Caitlin. They were investigating him for 2 missing girls out in California that they may or may not have ever found. Yeah. And like during the detective interview, he even asked me, he's like, really quick, just in the middle, he was just like, "Did he ever mention an Anna?" And I was like, "No." And then he jotted something down and changed the subject again. And I was just like, "So one of the missing girls' names is Anna." And then somebody else said another missing girl's name was like, it began with a C. I can't remember what it was. But yeah, we were just like Googling these girls' names like out in California. Never found anything of it at all. I think there was another one, I think in maybe Tennessee they were like looking at him for. But they just didn't have enough evidence, I guess. So.
Madness.
Well,
yeah.
was disturbing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But I didn't drink the drink.
Thank goodness.
You say drinking a drink.
Yeah.
Your empath ability. So you were never able to pick anything up on this guy other than say that creepy moment when You said you feel like there's an old guy down here that wants to kill me.
Yep.
But otherwise, yeah.
Well, and this is like what's crazy is that there were 2 times when he looked like he was going to kill me, but then he snapped out of it. And one time he was like on top of me, like choking me, and I was just kind of like, okay, I really can't breathe. And then he did it harder and like smiled, but his eyes started turning black, like straight up turning black, like his pupils just started dilating, like, and I just fight or flight mode kicked in, and I just kind of stayed still. And I remember I smiled at him just so that he would stop, and it worked, and he stopped, and he jumped off of me and was just kind of like, and it turned out that's what he did. He would literally like choke you to death, and he got off on like watching the lights leave your eyes. And that's what he did to the girl that he's in prison for killing. He actually wrapped her head with saran wrap and watched her suffocate and recorded it.
And then he sold that on.
Oh, those are the people.
Yeah. So he had the video. They claimed to the public that they never found the video because he said he felt bad and deleted it. I think they did find it. He had a lock of her hair that he kept. But yeah, even when he was like choking me, I didn't think anything of it. But yeah, that's what he did.
I forget whether it was you or Michele who had said that. It's reflecting. Like when you. Maybe it was Michele.
It may have been Michele. But what do you mean?
I believe she said, well, when I sit and it felt like somehow he was reflecting his feelings.
Yep. That was Michele. I remember that. Yeah, he did that. And he did it really well. It was weird. Like, I even walked into my mom's house, and Michele and Jimmy were just like, oh my gosh, this guy was so cool. Like, nobody had any clue at all. And everybody that knew him, like, even when it came out that he got arrested, me and Michele looked at each other. We're like, he wouldn't have killed anybody. Even though, I had like 50 red flags saying, oh yeah, he did. Like, he definitely knew more about Caitlin's murder than he let on. I guarantee you he did it. And it actually came out when he got arrested for this one, that somebody found a picture of him with her fiance and a couple other friends after she went missing. And even the cold case detective that was on her case that her family personally hired were like, he fits the bill. He is the perfect, 6 degrees away that nobody would even think of him. And that's the thing, is he used to stalk women all the time. They never found the spare key to her apartment. That's how he got in. And my firstborn actually has this sense too. Sorry, the baby's crying. But when Z was 3, they were telling me that they were having dreams and like seeing her laying by a creek. And they found her along a creek when she was missing. She took one look at her and was like, oh, that's the lady in the water. I was like, what? You're 3, what? And she's like, that's the lady in the water. And I was like, why would you say that? And she goes, because someone put her there. I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, Mom, they threw her in, and then they threw her key in, and it was shiny. And I didn't know what she was talking about. I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, they threw the key in. And I thought she meant like her engagement ring, because they never found her engagement ring. And no, it turns out the spare key to the apartment was never found. And Z kept telling me they threw her key in the water, and they found her in a creek.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Key was likely there. It's amazing that Z was on that.
Yeah. And then I think about a month later, I was telling somebody about this, and Z walked up and was like, Mommy, she doesn't look the same. She turned to black. You can't see her face anymore. Like, she like saw her like decomposing. And I was like, oh. And this was like literally like a month span. When Z was 3, they'd wake up every night crying, saying all these people were trying to talk to them and get to them. And she was giving out all these like gory details about what they looked like. Yep. And then it just went away. Never talked about it again. But it was like so creepy.
Worried about with kids in my head.
Yeah. So she picked up on that.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And that was before they even found her body, and they found it along a creek, and then I was like, oh, that's insane.
Wow. And I guess there's no reason to call any investigator or anything about.
I did, and they dismissed it, actually. Yeah, I called them and told them, and they were just kind of like, oh, whatever. it's a kid, blah blah blah. Obviously dismissing it.
Yeah.
But then they found it.
The nature of the evidence,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody that worked on that case like dropped the ball on it though. Like they didn't even process.
Why does that always happen? Yeah.
I have no idea. But like, yeah, they didn't even process the scene until like 48 hours after she was missing. And it was a mess.
Yeah.
So anything that could have been there, everybody just always assumed it was the fiance, and I was like, I don't think it was him. I really don't think it was him. Especially since they, found her head. I was like, he wouldn't. I don't think they were like, yeah, but that's a crime of passion. I'm like, I don't think it was him. Yeah.
Passion.
Yeah. But this wasn't. I even told the detective when I was talking to him about Micah. I was like, I know this isn't the first time he's done this, because it kind of came out like I'll never know all the details because they didn't take it to trial, and that bothers me because I want to know for like my own sake, to be selfish. But
it's understandable.
Yeah. Well, it was like rumored that he cut her fingertips and knocked all of her teeth out so they couldn't identify her body. Took the time to do that. They actually had to identify her by a bag of her bloody clothes that was like at the scene, like further away, because they couldn't identify her body. But yeah, he had been like texting her saying he was going to cut her head off and fuck her throat and just like all this like horrific stuff. He actually, if you like Google his name, you can find like the videos. He was like recording her through her house and sending it to her. And he walked up to her house and just kidnapped her at knife point or gunpoint or something and got her to leave her house in the middle of the night, and he zip tied her hands and everything, and he tried to tell detectives, like they even have the interviews public, he was just saying, oh yeah, like we were just playing, blah blah blah, and they're like, no, you zip tied her hands and put saran wrap around her head, like that's not, no.
Yeah, that's not playing.
Yeah. And he kept a lock of her hair. And the creepy thing is, if you go to his Instagram page, he actually made a post after he dumped her body and said that he was going to do something, but instead he ended up getting inspired.
Then the mind killer.
Yep. This is actually only like the second time that I've like actually talked about it. I did a podcast about it and just told everything in detail.
Well, there you go. You've told the story again.
Yeah.
Luckily not in such detail.
Yeah. Never picked up from him except that one time when I looked him in the eye and said it felt like there was somebody down here that wants me dead in the worst way possible.
I can't understand how somebody can block themselves so well. Like,
I
you
can't either.
do that. That's absurd.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, not today. Obviously, it really happened, but I can't understand. I don't know the mechanism.
Yeah. It was insane. And I already told you, like, the brain wavelength thing, like, that was crazy. And, like, literally every time we hung out, we would drink a jug of wine and watch, like, scary movies and do, like, commentary over top, like Mystery Science Theater 3000. Mm-hmm. Like, that's all we ever did. So we had no idea until these little things would pop up, and it was just kind of like, oh, that was weird. Oh, that was weird.
Yeah, lesson learned.
Yeah.
It's a red flag.
Yeah.
I have a quick question about like, a little more detail, like about kind of you mentioned like the butterflies in the brain. Are we talking like I'm not sure if you're familiar with like ASMR, how it's kind of like you can get kind of like brain tingles, kind of like that, kind of like fuzzy kind
Actually,
of.
yeah, it was pretty much exactly like that, but it was pretty strong, and it was so weird because it almost made me like lightheaded.
Right. That's very interesting.
The only person that's ever done that, ever.
Huh. Was there any type of like auditory cue or any type of touch or anything?
No, it was just as soon as we were sitting next to each other, and I was like, but he was horrible. Why did I have that? Yeah,
that's like really interesting. Like the ASMR, I guess, phenomena is pretty interesting because it's such a powerful like feeling that really the only what the research kind of dictates, it's usually like some type of cue, but like energetically, I feel like the phenomena probably has, roots in like auditory things, like physical sensations, and probably like some energetic aspect. And it seems like during that experience, you just get the straight energetic aspect of it. So that's very just very interesting.
All right. Well, I'm still dumbfounded. Because I don't like those shows. You know, those try to figure detective shows.
That's like all I do now. But after all this happened, it was funny because I don't think my mom really like thought about it, but she got me a book for Christmas, and it was the Encyclopedia of Serial Killers.
Oh, that's nice. Well, thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
What a perfect gift. Yeah.
That's a very odd gift.
Yeah. Thanks.
I mean, you'd think you'd want to kind of move away from that as much as possible.
I did for a long time. I actually wouldn't even make creepy cakes for a long time.
I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Not at all. How are things going today? You're still feeling empathic with but no more abductions or dreams?
No, but I did have a dream, probably within the last 6 years, that I won this game show, and my prize was that I got a picture of me with all of the kids that I've taught, and in my dream I just started crying because I recognized every single one of them, and it's like I had completely forgot about them, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's my kids, those are my kids, and I couldn't remember their names, but all of them looked completely different hairstyles. They weren't all blonde this time. And I always wanted to be a teacher growing up. I actually went to school briefly to be a kindergarten teacher, but then I ended up dropping out because I was like, dude, that's too much money. I'll never pay that off as a teacher. So I didn't, but I recognized every single one of those kids. I was like, I taught them at some point, and it actually kind of made me remember. I do remember at one point I was just almost teaching kids how to be kids.
Yeah.
How to laugh, how to do things, even up to when I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. So I was probably around 16, teaching a whole bunch of kids how to be kids.
That's amazing. And you'd actually be up for progression if you were able to go forward.
Oh yeah, I've been dying to do it. I was like, dude, just put me under. I want to know everything. I don't care. Do it.
Well, maybe we can get you there.
That would be awesome. Yes.
Yeah. And Caspian too. Caspian has some amazing stories as well.
Last thing I want to say, didn't you say as well it wasn't only the hair colours that changed, it was their skin colour as well? Or am I wrong? Was it just the hair colour that changed?
Hair color, yeah, skin color, actually. They were all different ethnicities, everything. I was just whatever they were trying to do, they succeeded. They succeeded. You will not be able to tell them from the kid next door. I will tell you that right now. And even as a kid growing up, I remember it's either go along with what they want you to do, or you can do this the hard way. So I just always was like, all right, well, let's do this. What are we doing? And so I had a great experience with it. But if I would have resisted, I know that, somebody mentioned earlier about, the kids, how they usually just take the kids to do these things with. And I think it's because the adults are more resistant. They're just like, what are you doing? Why are we here? Why are you taking the kids away from me, kind of thing? Mm-hmm. But the kids, they don't know what's going on. They'll just be like, oh, okay, they're more friendly. They're not hostile.
Mm-hmm. I think you said your family doesn't really talk about it. You and Michele talk about it.
Right. And I've always wanted to know what my dad knew, but my dad ended up having a couple strokes, and he's just my memories. He's still him, but he's just there's certain things I don't remember, and that's just one thing I don't really remember anymore, unfortunately. But he still has the scar. My mom has the scar. My mom never remembered anything. She's just oh. But when I went to take a picture of their arms, last time I saw them, she's like, what are you doing? I was like, taking a picture of the scar. She's like, the scar from what? I was like, the aliens. And she's like, oh, okay. She just goes along with it. Oh, okay. I don't think anybody has remembered as much as I did. I just know that, my dad, I think that he had been abducted before. He did tell me one time when he was about 18, he started kind of floating. He thought that he was dying, though. He said he started floating up out of his bed, and he said he was starting to go towards the ceiling, and he thought he was dying. So he went, wait, no, I'm not ready yet. And he said he just paused and started slowly sliding back down to the bed. And he said he laid there, and his whole body was tingling like it was asleep for like 20 minutes. So he thought that he was like dying. But I was like, I don't know about that.
I know what he's talking about.
Really?
Yeah. Me and Mum, we used to have these out-of-body experiences where, as I say, the room just felt like everything was spinning around us, like water going down a plug hole, at increasingly rapid speed, and then we would just shoot up, go straight up through the ceiling, pass up through the rafters, pass up through the ceiling tiles, everything, shoot up into the sky. You could feel like the water stinging and whipping against you, and how cold it was going up through the clouds, until we got to where we were going, this like tornado like tunnel, with light at the end of it. And then whenever we came back, the interesting thing is just that after those experiences, it would be like those times where you wake up and you slept on your limbs and the feelings just starting to creep back in, and it's got that kind of like almost pins and needly kind of like numb tingliness to it, but like a warm tingliness. And it was exactly like that, but throughout your entire body. And it passed after about 10 minutes or so. But it's interesting that he reports that, because that's exactly how it was for me and Mum as well. Every single time we were being taken. So I wonder if it was a very similar thing for him, because he also described like being lifted up and going towards the ceiling, but then he wasn't ready, so he came back down. Yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to comment. But no, that's fascinating.
Okay, so that's crazy. You mentioned the room spinning, because when I finally came out and told this story on Reddit, one of my friends that's like an Xbox friend that lives in St. Louis read it, and he just goes, oh my gosh, I thought this was a fever dream, but when I was about 6 years old, I fell asleep on my grandma's couch, and I woke up and there was like a man standing in the living room, and he said he did something with his hand and the room started spinning and he blacked out, and when he woke up he was in another room wearing completely different clothes, and he has no idea what happened at all.
Now it's also interesting that he mentioned about the hand, because I'm guessing the hand movement was this, because if so, I know exactly what he's talking about, because when they do that, that's how they get you out of your body.
What?
So that's fascinating, because I know exactly what he's talking about.
What? Dude, yeah, he just said he always thought it was a fever dream, and he said he did something with his hand and the room started spinning, and he woke up in another part of the house with different clothes on, had no idea what happened. And then he said, and he was 6 years old, but he, a couple days later, started talking about quantum physics with his mom.
Yeah.
When he was 6, and he's a little older than me, but we got to talking about it, and it was the same year our family was taken. 1992. 1992.
Yeah.
And
was it quantum physics and nanotechnology?
Nanotechnology, yep. All of that. In 1992, when he was 6. At 6.
92, like there's still, I guess, some like issues with quantum physics, but it wasn't like known like what it is now. Like there's some around the time there was a parapsychologist, Michael Talbot, who was starting to propose some like things with quantum physics and like consciousness and all that stuff, but that was not mainstream at all. That was like, super niche. Like you have to really know about parapsychology, but that was for a 6-year-old. Like, why would you be talking about that?
Yeah, I kind of want to see what he knows now. Like, if he has any other memories.
Definitely.
That's so crazy. But he said he always just thought it was a dream.
Ask
Yeah,
as
I
well.
should.
I can't remember what the hand movement was, because yeah.
I guarantee you he does. He just said he did something with his hand. That's so crazy. What?
Wow.
That's awesome. There was actually another friend of mine that reached out to me and said that she had something similar that she thought was a dream, and it was about a light coming through a window, and she couldn't remember what had happened, and that was also in 1992.
That's common as well. With some of these experiences in our Discord, one of them, she says that she had like a bluish light come through. Caspian, you have your story. It seems quite...
I had experience in, I think, 2006.
All in the 90s as well.
Light as well.
Yeah, that is so crazy.
Yeah. Well, I'll add it to the increasing list of things that we've got in common, and with other people as well. Yeah. Good grief! Wow.
That's so cool. Yeah, I'll have to get him on. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sam, amazing stories. Thank you for sharing the last story that completely derailed my brain. and I appreciate you coming on. Thank your sister for also watching your kids. so you can be here, and thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me. I even told like my work, I was like, oh, I get to talk about all the weird stuff you guys don't like listening about anymore.
Yeah, you're always welcome to talk about the weird stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks for being on. Always.